Hello, everybody, and welcome to ABM Answered, the quickfire demand generation and ABM video series. Today, I'm excited to be joined by Eli Rubel, who is not only a great creative marketer, but also a killer entrepreneur. He's the CEO of NoBoringDesign, who I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, we're in charge of the rebranding of Exit 5 and our B2B, which is nuts in itself. And also the CEO of Matamade, paid ads media on the right track.
That's right. You're on track.
Cool. And on top of conquering the world here, he has also helped me tremendously in my time of need with, I guess, what we can call mentorship, which I'm extremely grateful for. So I'm excited to record this episode. Eli, did I miss anything there?
No, that was a very, I'm going to have a hard time living up to that intro, but I'm happy to be here and chatting with you.
No, you definitely won't. So to run you and the viewers kind of through the rules, Eli in this case will be given a set of questions to respond to, typically all about account-based marketing and demand generation. But in this very special case, we're going to be tackling them from a brand perspective. The questions have come from challenges that we've collected at Mixed Reality Rooms, but also we've started to incorporate previous guest questions as well, because we're big time. So yes, Eli, are you ready to get going?
Let's rock and roll.
Cool. That's normally my line. I normally say rock and roll. Anyway, problem one. So knowing where to start. So again, this came in from an account-based marketing point of view, lots of factors, but specifically if we were going to target that question from a brand perspective, well, the foundations, what makes a good brand? And then if you're starting to incorporate brand into like your campaigns, how do you go about that? Where do you find inspiration? Is it a case of just slapping on a logo onto a slide deck? I don't know. Yeah, I'll let you take that one.
Yeah, I mean, I think brand has a lot to do with having the courage to take a bold stance and have a strong point of view. And that answer is just as relevant for the literal visual brand identity, the written brand identity, even, we talk about like founder brand or an individual person's brand. Like at the end of the day, people get excited by strong points of view that are very crisp and you know them for that thing, whether it's a brand or a person. So I think that's where you start is getting the executive leadership team on board with this idea that, hey, if we really want to be able to differentiate with our brand and have our brand drive results in our campaigns, whether account-based or not, there has to be alignment that we're willing to take risks and be bold and be different. And, those words are thrown around all the time, but then you end up with a brand that's been committed to death and it looks like every other brand. And they're like, well, this is great. We look like Stripe. Stripe's so successful. I'm like, cool. Well, there are about 100 other startups that look pretty much just like Stripe, and you're just going to blend right in. So that was my long-winded answer to where to start.
Nice. Okay, so I'll save the follow-on questions. We can always loop back if there's time. Great answer. Problem two was balancing kind of brand consistency and personalization. So quite a convoluted question from me, I guess, but like, how do you balance that out? So Joe Minchin is a guest I've had on the show before, and he described, for example, ABM as like a whole branding exercise going after one account. It's like Stripe and GSK, Stripe and Vodafone, or however you want to do it, and they kind of like make a little hub for I guess how much would you adapt to brands to kind of fit the message of others, if ever? It's a bit of a tough question, weird one for me.
Yeah, so I like to tackle questions like this by abstracting them a little bit. So imagine how Nike runs ads or campaigns. And imagine if they changed their brand voice and their vibe to match every key account that they wanted to go after. So let's imagine that they were trying to go after some group that's known for being kind of lazy and like sluggish and not very sporty or athletic. Imagine if Nike ran an ad where their copy was like, it's totally cool to chill, kick back with Nike, right? Like that would just feel wrong. And it would just be confusing. And it wouldn't be, if they did that for everyone in a different direction, it would just be a confused mess. And so I think you can still be personalized and targeted in an account-based way while maintaining your brand voice and while maintaining distinction in how you show up for those people.
The core values. Side question: how many? I don't know if it depends. Can you ever have too many like values? Have you ever been through like a branding exercise of like? Well, you mentioned when there's more people involved, you just get this blur, gray area, middle area. Like what? How many people are in the perfect kind of brand team? Like you need probably a product marketer, you need a creative lead. I don't know.
So I have a contrarian view here because I don't come from the world of branding agencies. I don't come from the world, even though I have one, I don't come from the world of like Wyden and Kennedy, WPP, whatever, these really fancy formal agencies where people studied this and this is their science and whatever. To me, it's more of it's like a feeling. And so my feeling around brand, and I probably have a bunch of creatives that work for me and with me that would disagree with what I'm about to say, but this is my point of view. So my point of view is it is very hard to have a unique point of view if you begin combining too many things, as you alluded to. If I, as the CEO, say, I want our brand to be strong and trustworthy, and then a product marketer says, yeah, well, the brand should also be friendly and easygoing because that's like part of our own ethos as a company. And then, some other person comes in and says, very quickly you get just competing forces, and suddenly you go back to this kind of muddled brown mush that doesn't really stand for anything at all. So my preference usually is just to strong arm a bold direction and not really care if we're leaving other things out, because I'd rather be known and stand out than have everyone feel happy and good that we included their value in the brand, but just be like everything else out there.
Yeah, no, I love that. And that ties into the next kind of problem quite nicely, because it can work both ways. So the next problem was like knowing when to rebrand or evolve. And I guess there's two angles. One, you've taken this bold stance and it hasn't gone well. God, I'm sure that's not the case with your campaigns. But the other stance is it's gone really well, and the competition now are like copying your copy, or like this, they want to be like you, and it starts becoming a gray, murky water. Potentially, maybe that doesn't happen, and I think that's less likely to happen, of course. But like, how do you know when's time for a change to spruce it up, so to speak, or add a little Botox to a brand and change it?
So to speak to the first part of your question, I would actually love to. I don't know how we would come up with an answer to this, but I would love to know if there's ever been a small brand or like an emerging brand that did something really bold that flopped, where it was like truly an absolute failure, and not only a failure, but like people were angry at them or frustrated with them or whatever. Obviously, it's different for a legacy established brand like Levi's or any of these large, been around for a very long time brands. Like for them, sure, they could screw things up because they have a demographic that knows them for a certain thing. They already have a brand affinity. But for the small company or smaller emerging company, I think we have to default back to this notion that nobody gives a shit about you and nobody's paying attention. And so you have to fight for that attention. And so even if you do, so this reminds me of the first time when I was living in San Francisco. I remember the first time an emoji was used on a billboard over the 101 freeway. And it was a poop emoji. It was like super edgy at the time, right? It had never been done before. And whether you thought that it was appropriate to have a poop emoji 15 feet tall on a billboard advertising your product or not, everyone was talking about it. Regardless of if you thought it was a great campaign or not, everyone was aware of it. They knew the brand that put it up there and they were talking about it. And so to me, that's a successful campaign, right? That's a successful brand position. It's like they were willing to be bold enough to try something different that felt risky. But at the end of the day, if they hadn't done that, no one would have ever been talking about them or known their name. So yeah, I think that most brands are too precious and too pearl clutching about something that will never get noticed unless they're willing to be bold.
I think when you're a smaller startup, the founder is probably the one almost leading the charge with the brand. And I've fallen into the trap many times, not so much anymore because I've realized, to your point, no one actually cares about you until like you're massive. You fall into like an own echo chamber, right? Of like, you feel like every little thing is like to do with you, and it's not the case at all. Like the bigger ecosystem, it's completely not relevant. So what about on the flip side of that question, the bigger brands like Levi's, other jeans providers are available. I don't know if there's a rule behind that. Anyway, is there any metric, or does the marketing team just wake up one day and go, yeah, time for a rebrand? Like, I don't know the world, Eli. Like, how does that work?
So we typically don't work with these giant legacy brands. So I would have a hard time speaking from first person experience. I could speak more to, technology companies who have been around for 7 to 10 years. They're Series D, like later stage, maybe they're pre-IPO. I typically think that folks come to the realization that it's time for a rebrand when they're looking around and all of their competitors look more modern than them, more edgy than them, just more fresh. And here they are, like a very legit business, maybe even bigger than those other businesses, but they look a bit dated. They don't look like something that people would be excited to go, buy shares of stock when they go IPO. So it's kind of like trying to reignite a fire and a sense that what they're doing is innovative. One of the things that people underestimate so much is the impact visuals have on people's decision-making criteria. So think about the last time you were looking for a tool. I'll speak first person. The last time I was looking for a tool, let's pretend it was time tracking software. So, obviously the first thing I'm going to do is ask peers or friends, like, hey, what are you using? Maybe the second thing, or the first, just depending on where I'm at in my day, is I go to Google and I type in like time tracking software for agencies or whatever. And I'm going to click on the first 3, 4, 5 links that Google feeds me. And I'm going to pull up their websites. And the very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to close any tabs that look ancient. I'm going to close any tabs where the website and the brand just looks like super dull and corporate, because I'm not super dull and corporate. I'm like pushing boundaries and trying to drive my business. So why on earth would I trust a business where the very front page of their existence to the entire world is super bland? Their product is probably super bland too. And that might not be true, but I still close their tab. And I would venture to guess that many others also do the same thing. And so they didn't earn a spot in the room to even get that demo booked because of something as silly as their brand and website needing to be refreshed.
For sure. No, when you put it like that, it makes a lot of sense. I'm conscious of time, so let's persevere. The question that I'm incorporating into this is implementation of AI. So every company right now is talking about it. It's been around for ages, but how are we going to incorporate it into our workflows? How, from a branding and a creative perspective, if you know, or if you do as well, it's always good if you can speak from yourself or in first person, as you said, do you incorporate AI into helping you design and maybe ideate some of these projects?
Yeah. So for us, we don't use AI in the design itself unless explicitly the client wants that. Maybe they're an AI company and they want it to kind of have that feel, but 99% of our clients don't want that. And so we don't do that. The way that we are currently looking into leveraging AI in this process is around the brief. So the quality of a brief and the quality of the information that you receive from a client for a campaign or for anything really drives in large part the quality of the output, the quality of the design. And so if you get a bad brief or an incomplete brief or a brief that lacks clarity, then the work is going to lack clarity and there's going to be more rounds of revisions and all sorts of things there. So we're currently working on leveraging AI to get better answers from clients more quickly. Obviously the most ideal state is our creative director can sit down with every single client anytime they have a request and spend 30 minutes brainstorming what they want and teasing it out of them. That's just not realistic. It's not realistic for the clients. They don't want to put that time on their calendar. It's not realistic for our team. So leveraging something like AI where they can fill out a brief and then before they submit it, it's like, hey, you said you wanted it to look cool. That's not very helpful. What do you mean by cool? Can you give me 3 links of what cool is to you and why? Right? Just like simple questions that can deliver a much clearer result.
That's super interesting because the other people I literally spoke to today and filmed episodes with, none of them are using AI for like go-to-market or engagement or anything like that. They're using it for the research stage. And it sounds like what AI is good for is that preparation stage so that humans can deliver their best work. It's really interesting from the branding perspective too. These two are quick fire. All of the questions from now on are from previous guests. This one is from Ryan Malloy, and he asked, and I love this one because this is you in a nutshell. What is the biggest marketing risk you've ever taken? Or I'm going to expand this to like entrepreneurial risk with like kind of pitching.
I feel like you're constantly taking entrepreneurial risks. If you're not taking entrepreneurial risks, then it's stagnation, and I hate stagnation. So, I mean, I published recently about something as simple as like showing up to SaaStr with a backpack full of semi-permanent sidewalk stickers that were 3 foot by 3 foot, totally not allowed, totally illegal. I was like running around, pasting them to the ground, trying not to get caught, ended up getting caught, almost got kicked out. So it's like, what do I have to lose? I got the ticket for free. So my only cost was getting myself there. And it was kind of like funny and fun in addition to a rush and potentially upside for my business. So why not?
That's a quite good one. That in itself is a decent one. I've asked that question a few times, and I think that's one of the better answers for sure. The next question was from Rachel Locke, and kind of following the same lines. She asked, what is your favorite business event, I should probably add, that you've been to and why?
The best business event I've been to this year was Exit 5. They're the event that Dave Gerhardt threw in Burlington, Vermont. You and I got to meet there in person, which was super cool. And I think for me, what made that event so great was it was small enough and curated enough that it was a bunch of people that I knew from LinkedIn, but had never met in person. And that was really neat to get that quality time and get to take those relationships a step further than just like a bubble on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Yeah, I think the feedback from that event was nuts, wasn't it? I think that's definitely the format of the future. The last question, and this might be my favorite question that has ever been asked on the show, is from Emily York Goldney. And she is the strategy and business director at an agency called Clarify. And she asked, if the sky was the limit in terms of budget, what would be your best in class recommendation to engage a target account? And you can take it whatever way you want, whether it's just, I guess, let's put some parameters on it. It's like a one-to-one basis. You've got to impress Microsoft or you've got to impress Nike. I'll let you pick the account. What stops are you pulling out? I mean, you've already mentioned the signs, the semi-permanent signs, which is quite smart.
Man, if it was a really big account and I had the budget, I would probably figure out where all of the key stakeholders who make decisions there live. And then I would buy billboards around each of their homes, like the nearest substantial billboard next to this executive's house. And if there are 5 executives who are part of the decision-making process, and each one of those billboards would use their name, maybe not their last name, but it would use their first name, and it would have a message on it that's very clearly written for them. They know it's written for them based on the context, but everyone else would just be like, it's almost like when you see like a marriage proposal that goes up on a, Jumbotron stadium thing. It's kind of like, obviously you're not proposing marriage to these people, but you can say something that everybody else is like, oh, what on earth is that all about? And to them, they're just blown away. It becomes a talking point. they go back to their team. I think stuff like that that's just a bit crazy, but people will notice it for that reason.
Eli, you're a genius. That's hilarious. You could also have, like, depending on their commute to work, multiple billboards where it's like the sequence of messages.
Yeah, 100%.
And you've got unlimited budget, so why not? You could put up the billboards.
Right.
Eli, we've got to the end. The last thing I'll ask is, do you have a question for our next guest that you would like me to ask?
Oh, that's a good one. I would ask them what keeps their fire lit.
Okay, nice.
You know, I feel like we're all humans at the end of the day, and we all have to keep that motivation, keep that fire, especially when we're thinking about account-based marketing and brand, where it's easy to coast. You could phone it in and check all the boxes and probably do an okay job, or you could have that fire inside of you where you push it to the next limit, the next level. And so I'm curious what other guests do to stoke and keep that fire lit.
That's a great question. You're probably going to get two complete different answers depending on if they work at a startup or like Vodafone. But I'll include that. Eli, thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on.
Cheers.